There are certain moments in life you can't unhear, unsee, or unfeel. That night, Marcus said something that hit all three. And it all started with a drink I didn't even want to have. I wasn't in the mood to go out. Work had drained me, and the idea of squeezing into a booth at some loud bar felt more like a chore than a night off. But Marcus insisted. He was back in town for a few days, and we hadn't caught up in nearly a year. "Just one drink," he texted. "No pressure. I'll even buy." Marcus and I had history. Not the kind that leads to grand gestures or dramatic breakups, but a quiet, complicated kind of tension that had lingered between us since college. He was the hot guy everyone wanted. Easy smile, broad shoulders, just the right amount of cocky. I was the guy who crushed on him from 2 seats away during late-night study sessions and never said a word. We'd both moved on, I thought. He picked the place, some trendy craft cocktail bar with exposed brick and low lighting that made everyone look hotter. When I arrived, he was already there, nursing a whiskey and chatting up the bartender like he owned the place. "Still take forever to show up," he teased, smirking as I slid onto the stool beside him. Nice to see some things never change. I rolled my eyes and flagged down the bartender. "Just a beer, thanks." We started with small talk. He'd switched jobs, was doing freelance now. I was still at the same place, grinding away. It was easy, casual, like slipping back into an old rhythm. We laughed about dumb college memories, talked about mutual friends, and roasted our past selves like it was sport. 3 drinks in, we moved to a booth in the corner. Quieter, more private. And that's when things started to shift. Marcus wasn't drunk, but he was loose. His words started to slow a bit, and he leaned in closer when he talked, his hand brushing my forearm more than once. I ignored it at first, told myself he was just being Marcus, but there was something different in his eyes. A weight behind his gaze that hadn't been there before. "You ever wonder what it'd be like if things were different between us?" he asked, swirling the ice in his glass without looking up. My heart paused. I blinked at him, unsure how to respond. "Different how?" He smirked a little, like he was testing me. "I mean, you've always liked guys, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah." He looked up then, really looked at me. "So what do you think when you look at me?" That was it. The question that took the air out of the room. I stared at him, pulse quickening. Was he serious? Was he playing around? Marcus was straight, or at least that's what he'd always claimed. I think. I started, unsure if I was walking into a trap. "I think you know what I thought back then. But that was college. People move on." His eyes narrowed just slightly. "Yeah, but sometimes you don't." There was a beat of silence. Then he leaned in a little closer, lowered his voice. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded cautiously. "Can I see it?" At first, I thought I misheard him. "See what?" Marcus gave a small smile, the kind that was more nervous than cocky this time. He licked his lips, then leaned back in the booth, casually, as if asking to see my dick was no more outrageous than asking for the time. "Yours. I just want to see what it looks like." No weirdness, no judgment, just curious. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, get up, or lean in closer. We were just having drinks. And now he wanted to see me naked? My throat went dry. My heart pounded. I didn't know what the hell to say. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, trying to figure out if he was drunk, joking, or serious. The bar noise faded into a soft buzz. It was just me and Marcus, sitting across from each other in that dim corner, our drinks half empty, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. "You're not serious," I said finally, voice lower than I intended. Marcus didn't flinch. He held my gaze, calm, too calm. Then he shrugged like it was no big deal. "I don't know. I've just never, seen one that wasn't mine." I blinked. "What? You've never been in a locker room?" "Not like that," he said, swirling his drink. "I mean, I've seen guys naked, but not like this, not with someone I know, not like looking." I leaned back, trying to process it. "And you chose me for this little science experiment?" His lips twitched into a smirk. "You were always the one I was curious about. Thought you'd say no, though." I stared at him. "I still might," he laughed, but there was something behind it. Tension, maybe. Nerves. something real. All right, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Forget, I asked. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the truth? I'd imagine him saying something like that 100 times in my head. Back in college, in the late-night study rooms, in our shared Ubers, when he'd fall asleep next to me on the couch during movie nights. I used to wonder what would happen if he ever crossed that line. If he ever looked at me the way I looked at him. And now, here he was, sitting less than a foot away. Tipsy, maybe, but far from wasted. Still holding eye contact. Still serious. What do you think would happen, I said slowly, if I said yes? Marcus looked down for the first time that night, then back up. I don't know, he said. I'd probably feel like an idiot, or maybe I'd learn something about myself. The booth felt smaller, warmer. My knee brushed his under the table, and neither of us moved. I tilted my head. So, this is what? Curiosity? He nodded. And trust, maybe. I trust you. That word caught me off guard. I'd expected a joke, a smirk, a laugh to undercut the moment. But he said it without flinching. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't think you'd keep it between us, he added. Or if I didn't think you'd take it seriously. Now I was the one not sure what to say. Because I did take it seriously. More than I should have. Every crush I'd buried, every what if I'd filed away under not going to happen. It was all swimming to the surface. I picked up my drink, took a slow sip, then set it down. You're not joking? Nope. You're not playing some dare game with your old frat buddies? No games, just me. Asking something I've wanted to ask for a long time. I exhaled through my nose. He wasn't messing around. The tension between us had changed shape. It wasn't playful or awkward anymore. It was thick with something heavier, something electric. And suddenly, the idea didn't feel so far-fetched. I leaned in, matching the seriousness in his tone. Not here, I said quietly. He swallowed, nodded once. Okay. We didn't say much after that. Just paid the tab, left a tip, and walked out into the night like we hadn't just had the most bizarre, intimate conversation of our friendship. The cool air hit me like a reset button, but it didn't erase what just happened. Marcus didn't stumble. He wasn't swaying or slurring. If anything, he looked more focused than he had all night. Your place or mine? He asked, with a crooked grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I didn't answer right away. It wasn't about where. It was about what this was about to be. About whether I could handle whatever was about to happen, and whatever came after. I wasn't just some curiosity on his checklist. And I wasn't sure I could play that role without letting something inside me get chewed up. But I still said, mine. We walked in silence. It was only a few blocks from the bar, but the city felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath with us. I unlocked the door to my apartment and stepped inside first, flicking on the lights and tossing my keys in the bowl near the entrance. Marcus followed, hands in his pockets, looking around like he'd never been there before, even though he had, twice, both times to crash on my couch after nights out. Now he was standing in the doorway like this was a different world. You want water or something? I asked, suddenly hyper-aware of the casual mess around the apartment. Blanket half off the couch, shoes by the door, a pizza box on the counter. He shook his head, then sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. He wasn't looking at me, just staring at the floor, like he was thinking hard. I hovered by the kitchen counter, waiting for something. A joke. A laugh. Nah, just kidding. But it didn't come. Instead, he said, You can say no. I know. I mean it, man. If this is weird, if it messes things up, then it does, I cut in. But you asked, so don't pretend it was nothing. He looked up then, and the expression on his face caught me off guard. It wasn't playful or smug or even flirty. It was vulnerable, like he was afraid of what I'd see if I looked too close. I didn't know who else I could ask, he said quietly. My throat tightened a little. I hated that part of me, the part that still wanted this, despite everything, was louder than the voice warning me to back off. I crossed the room and sat down beside him. Not touching, but close enough. So what do you want? I asked, voice low. He took a breath, then looked over at me. I just want to see it, he said again. Not in a sexual way. I'm not trying to mess with you. He paused, swallowing. I'm trying to figure something out, I think. I studied him for a long moment. There was no challenge in his eyes, no games, just quiet uncertainty, and maybe something else. I nodded once, slow. Okay. His breath caught, like he didn't expect me to agree. You sure? He asked. Are you? He didn't answer that. Instead, he leaned back slightly, watching me. The silence stretched out, heavy. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears, my fingers tingling with adrenaline, and yet I felt strangely calm, present. I stood up and stepped back from the couch. Marcus followed me with his eyes, but didn't move. I reached for my belt slowly, giving him space to stop this if he wanted to. He didn't. He just watched. And the way he watched, quiet, still, breath held, it felt like something was shifting between us. I undid my belt without rushing, without showboating. Just steady, deliberate movements. My hands didn't shake, but I could feel Marcus's eyes locked on every one of them, like he was trying to memorize this, like he needed it to mean something. The silence wasn't awkward. It was intense, focused. When I slipped my jeans down and stood there in my boxers, Marcus sat up straighter. His hands clasped between his knees, his jaw tight. Not from discomfort. It was something closer to concentration. His breath came slower, deeper. You can stop me any time, I said, my voice quieter now. He nodded, eyes flicking up to meet mine briefly, before returning downward. I pulled my boxers down next, letting them fall to the floor. I stood there, completely exposed, the tension in the room crackling like a wire stretched too tight. Marcus didn't move. His eyes scanned slowly, more careful than lustful. He wasn't ogling, wasn't reacting like someone turned on. He looked stunned, not just by me, but maybe by the fact that he was doing this, that he'd asked, that I'd said yes. After a long beat, he let out a breath and said, "Can I get closer?" I didn't answer. I just nodded. He stood slowly and took a small step toward me, close enough now that I could smell the faint hint of whiskey on his breath, mixed with whatever cologne he always wore. Earthy, clean, familiar. He didn't touch me, didn't even raise a hand, just stood there, looking. I watched his face more than anything, how his brows knit slightly, how his lips parted just barely. There was no mocking smirk, no teasing grin. It was as if all the usual armor Marcus wore, the cocky charm, the careless confidence had fallen away, and what was left was someone unsure, searching. I wasn't hard, but I was hyper-aware of everything. The air against my skin, the heat coming off his body, the fact that this was him, Marcus, standing inches away, staring at me like he'd never seen something so real in his life. Then he said quietly, "You're not even nervous." I raised an eyebrow. "You are." He laughed once, softly, without looking up. "Yeah, I am." A beat passed, then another, and finally he whispered, "Can I touch it?" The question landed with a weight I didn't expect. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. This was the line. Before this, maybe it was curiosity, a look don't touch moment. But this wasn't just about seeing anymore. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I studied him. How his hand hovered near his side like he wasn't sure whether to lift it. How his breathing had gone shallow again. How his eyes looked a little scared now. "Why?" I asked softly. His gaze flicked up to mine, and something vulnerable cracked through. "Because I've thought about it more than I want to admit," he said. "And I don't know what that means yet, but I need to know if it feels like I think it will." I swallowed hard, then nodded. "Okay," I said. And he reached out, slowly, carefully, reverently, and touched me. His fingers brushed me, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch skin, like something sacred might crack under his hand. It wasn't sexual, not at first. It was delicate, like he was handling a secret. Marcus didn't say anything. He just stood there, focused, his touch light and tentative. I'd never seen him like this before. This careful, this still. There was something almost innocent in the way he moved, like he was doing something forbidden and didn't know if he'd regret it in the morning. I watched his face, not his hand. I wanted to see every twitch of his jaw, every flicker in his eyes. That's where the truth was. And what I saw wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something else. Something slower, more raw. His thumb dragged gently along the base, and I sucked in a quiet breath. Not because it was intense, but because of how not intense it was. How quiet. How weirdly intimate. I could feel myself starting to harden beneath his touch, and for a second, I almost pulled back. But I didn't. Marcus didn't react to the shift. Or maybe he did, but he didn't show it. He just kept watching, his fingers resting now, not exploring further, like the weight of what he'd done had caught up to him. I should stop, he murmured. Why? Because, he exhaled, dropping his hand slowly. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I stepped back slightly, reached down for my boxers, and pulled them on without a word. Marcus watched me the whole time, his face unreadable now. The heat between us hadn't faded. It had just changed temperature, no longer the low simmer of physical tension, but something messier, emotional, complicated. You okay? I asked as I buttoned my jeans. He nodded too quickly. Yeah, I just... Sorry, I didn't mean to. You meant to, I said gently. You just didn't expect it to feel like this. He looked at me then, and for the first time all night, I saw something close to fear. Not of me, of himself. I thought I'd feel different, he said quietly. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. And how does it feel? Marcus took a second, then answered honestly. Like I've crossed into something I can't go back from. That hit harder than I expected, because I knew exactly what he meant. There was no going back. Not after this. Not after what he saw in my face, what I let him touch. Not after the part of himself he just admitted to me without words. We stood there for a long minute, silence stretching between us like a thread pulled tight. Finally, he broke it. Do you hate me now? No, I said, but I think you need to figure out what you're actually looking for. Marcus looked down, ran a hand through his hair. I'm not trying to mess with you. I swear. I know, I said. That's why I let you. He looked at me then, eyes tired and wide open. What do we do now? That question hung in the air, fragile and heavy. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Marcus didn't stay the night. We didn't fight. We didn't even say much after that last question. I offered him another drink. He shook his head, gave me a weak smile, and said, I think I need to walk for a bit. I nodded, even though something in my chest twisted when he said it. When he left, I sat on the couch where we'd been. The cushions were still warm. His glass sat untouched on the coffee table, condensation sliding slowly down the side, like the whole room was holding its breath. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, except that it was a lot. And it wasn't simple. I slept like crap. Woke up at 4 in the morning and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, playing everything over in my head like a film reel I couldn't stop. The look on his face, the way his fingers hesitated, the way his voice cracked when he said he didn't know what he was doing. But he did. That was the thing. He knew. He just wasn't ready to name it. The next day, I didn't expect to hear from him. I figured he'd need space. Maybe regret it. Maybe pretend it never happened. I'd seen guys do that before. Guys who pushed the boundary too far and then snapped right back into denial like it never cracked open anything at all. But around noon, my phone buzzed. Marcus, you free later? That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just that. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, Me? Yeah. You okay? He responded a minute later. Marcus. I don't know, but I want to talk. That night, he showed up at my door again. No bar this time. No drinks. Just him in a hoodie and jeans, his hands shoved into his pockets like he was trying to shrink himself. I let him in. We didn't sit right away. We stood awkwardly in my kitchen, the tension so thick it was almost comical. He was the first to speak. I don't think I'm straight, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a confession filled with theatrics. It was just a statement. Honest. Plain. Okay, I said, just as gently. I don't think I'm gay either. I don't know what I am. That's fine. He looked up, like he was waiting for some kind of judgment. When he didn't see any on my face, he exhaled, like his lungs had been holding that in since the night before. I've thought about you before, he admitted. Not just your body. I mean, us. Like what it would be like if I felt the same. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I didn't want to fill the space with my own expectations. He stepped closer, his voice softer now. Last night wasn't a dare. It wasn't some weird curiosity thing. I mean, yeah, I wanted to see, but it wasn't about your third leg. I almost smiled. Could have fooled me. He laughed. Quiet, nervous, but the moment softened. I panicked, he said. I didn't know how else to say I was into you. My stomach flipped. You're into me? He nodded, eyes still fixed on mine. Yeah, I don't know what that means yet, but yeah. We stood in silence for a beat. Then I asked, Can I kiss you? He didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward and did it, and nothing about it felt confused. The first kiss was slow, careful, testing boundaries. It wasn't desperate or hurried. It was something that felt like it had been building for years without either of us realizing it. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, but when I responded, he leaned in more, the tension that had been in the air since the bar finally releasing. We pulled back for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing mingling. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to memorize me, like he needed reassurance that this wasn't just a fleeting curiosity. It's not a dare, he whispered. I know, I said, and I don't care about that. I want this. He smiled, a little sheepish, and leaned in again. His hands found mine, fingers intertwining, the simple touch grounding us after the storm of last night. We didn't rush. We didn't talk about what this meant yet. There was no plan, just the two of us, finally crossing a line that had been there for years, but neither of us had dared approach. After a while, we settled on the couch. The night outside was quiet, the hum of the city far away. We talked, tentatively at first, about feelings we'd buried, about moments that had lingered in memory. Then laughter followed, then silence, then another kiss, slower, deeper this time, full of all the words neither of us had said out loud. Marcus rested his head on my shoulder, and I ran my fingers through his hair. Everything felt right. Wrong? Maybe, in some ways, but the way he fit against me, the way his hand held mine so naturally, it felt like it had always been meant to happen. I've thought about this, he said softly, for years. Just didn't know if it was real. It is, I whispered, and it doesn't have to be anything else yet. Just this. We sat like that for hours, occasionally speaking, mostly just existing in a space that was ours alone. Neither of us rushed. Neither of us questioned. It was electric, it was intimate, and it was real. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, we were still there, exhausted, smiling, hearts racing in unison. Marcus looked at me, eyes bright and a little nervous. So, what now? He asked. I shrugged, smiling. We take it one moment at a time. We've got years of what if to catch up on. He grinned, leaning back, exhaling like a weight had been lifted from him. I like the sound of that. And in that quiet morning, with the city still asleep outside, we realized that a simple night of drinks had turned into something neither of us could have predicted. A first step towards something real, something messy, something beautifully ours. We were just having drinks. Until he asked to see it. And that question changed everything.